And when you hire drivers, they have to be screened. You got to do drug testing, background testing.
We're here to keep everyone safe. We're here to keep the patients safe, the drivers safe, and protect the companies as well.
Welcome back to NEMT Experts. I've got Pamela Mack with me. She is the owner of Occuscreen. So whenever you're growing your NEMT business, you got to hire more drivers. And when you hire drivers, they have to be screened. You got to do drug testing, background testing. Occuscreen helps you do exactly that. Pamela, thanks for being with me. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we got a chance to have our teams connect the other week at the NEMT conference in Glendale, Arizona. Pamela, your company, fits a very critical need that every NEMT business has, right? Like, there's no way around it. You hire drivers, they have to be screened. Your company helps do that. We're going to delve into different topics about that, but can you just give us an overview of your background and how you started Occuscreen?
Yeah, sure. My husband actually started it over 30 years ago, and we're still the founder owners. So that's kind of unusual in our space right now. We've been doing background screening and drug screening since that time. And I would say for the last 15 or so years, maybe a little bit longer, we have been working in NEMT industry as well. So that accounts for about half of our business. So we also work outside of the industry, but we've had a lot more experience than a lot of, CRAs, which is what we are. Occuscreen's a CRA. We have a lot more experience in this industry, and it's a pretty unique industry. So we're excited to be part of it, and we're watching all the changes happening right now. NEMT's doing a fantastic job. So it's been something that we kind of fell into, and we're very happy that we did.
15 years doing NEMT, 30 years overall, and half of your business is NEMT, screening NEMT drivers.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to start off talking about is, what type of screening can be done and should be done when an NEMT business is actually hiring drivers.
So the interesting part about the NEMT industry is there's typically a state contract with a requirement. So we don't even get to just say, hey, here's the best thing for you to do. It's pretty much the broker or the TP coming to us and saying, here's my requirement, and then we're setting it up for them. But what it will typically include is a criminal background check of 7 years, sometimes longer in certain states, which would be like a felony and misdemeanor search. It'll include a sex offender registry, and it will include a motor vehicle report. Typically, those things are going to be part of the screening package. And then also a drug screen, and that'll be a specific panel defined by either the broker or the state or the contract. And so that's the main pieces to it. And there's slight changes. One thing I think NEMT wants to work with is kind of making it the same across the country, which would be an amazing thing if all the requirements were the same, but right now they're not. So what's nice is that we have worked with a lot of different contracts and a lot of different brokers, and so we usually have a pretty good idea of what's required in the state, or we can find that information out. So I know it's one piece that's difficult, and I found out at NEMT a little scary for new NEMT providers, and even for those that have been working for a long time, is the background screening process. It's one little piece for them of the multitude of things that they have to do. And so what's kind of nice is that we have the experience to know, what is probably going to be required, or can find that information out and help them through it, because it doesn't really need to be scary. It's actually it's pretty simple, but it's a little intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, no, there's just a lot of hoops to jump through for an NEMT business to get up and started. And it's good to know that you guys have NEMT businesses covered for this piece of it. And that sort of brings me to my next sort of topic, which is, how does an NEMT business know if the CRA, the screening company, is actually doing it correctly. They're doing the right screening and they're doing it in the right way. And obviously, you've been doing this for a long time. So yeah, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, it's a good question. We are highly, highly regulated by the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And by the way, that's a very badly named act because it has the word credit in it. So everyone says to me, we don't have to worry about it. We're not running credit reports, but it's actually regulating any information we provide. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act has all sorts of compliance regulations for us and for the employer. So the TPs themselves. So your company that you work with needs to be very, very well, very knowledgeable about the Fair Credit Reporting Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the FCRA. And one of the ways you would know that is if the company is accredited by the Professional Background Screening Association. So we have an accreditation process, just like now NEMTAC does, which I think is amazing. And that process for us to get accredited is pretty in depth. We have to prove everything we're doing correctly as possible, and that we're complying with all sorts of federal requirements. So if you're looking at all sorts of screening companies and you have no idea where to start, one hint would be to make sure that they are accredited, and then you'll know they are having to continually prove over and over again that they're following all the correct processes. And then other than that, I mean, if you're sending your reports into a broker and they're denying them, they're probably not doing what is necessary, or not, looking in the right places for you. So that would be another way, another hit. But you'd rather not pay someone to do something and then find out later it didn't work. So
yeah.
And
no,
also just finding someone maybe who's experienced. There are a lot of preferred providers in the industry, and I think they're going to have a little more insight than going out and looking for someone who's never delved into this industry before would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty straightforward. I want to get into the actual, screening and background checking. So let's say I'm an NEMT business. I want to hire this driver, and I say, okay, I got to get my, my new employee drug checked, background checked. And I come to Occuscreen, what is the process step by step for me to get this person screened?
Mm-hmm. So it's pretty simple. You would reach out to our company. We would send you an email that says, asks you, who are you with? What brokers are you working? Are you not working for any brokers? What state are you in? We'll get that kind of information. And then the TP would then sign a end user agreement. And the end user agreement is not a contract. There's no monthly minimums or anything like that. It's just an agreement that we're all going to follow the FCRA and use compliant practices, and then terms and that sort of thing. Once we have that agreement and we've done a little bit of credentialing and established that the transportation provider is actually a transportation provider, then we'll set up the account. We'll send you some information on how to log into our account and order the background check and the drug screen. So both of those can be done electronically. And you'll literally just go and put in the person's name, their email address, and it will go to the driver, this disclosure form. They'll then click on a link, fill out all their information, sign off consent, and then that will come back to us and we can run that process. On the drug screen side, there will be options that you can see which collection site would be closest to that driver. You can then there's a paper process as well, but most people now use electronic. Electronically, you can order the form, basically, to be sent to that driver. They'll get it as a passport on their phone, so it's like a QR code, and they'll get some information on where the collection site is. They'll go off to the collection site, leave their specimen there, and then we'll get the results for that. We'll get the results for the background check. We'll put everything together, and then the TP will then log in and get all that information on their driver.
Okay.
So it's not
bada bang.
Yeah, it's not too difficult. There's a couple steps involved, and once you've done it, once you're set up and you've looked through the instructions or called us for help or whatever, it's actually a pretty simple process. I think one thing that's important, I would say is important to note, is that most most people in the world think that a background check is all about a social security number. You put in the social security number and then out pops everything you ever wanted to know about that person. And so I think that there's sometimes a frustration of like, oh, it's taking a couple days, or it's, I didn't get all the information in 1 minute. And that's because it's not how it works at all. There's actually different processes, different courthouses we sometimes have to reach out to. It's not by social security number, it's by name and date of birth, and then addresses and all sorts of other ways that we identify someone. So just knowing that it's not kind of the instant process everyone thinks it is. It takes a lot of different sources and a lot of different, sometimes a couple days, sometimes not, but there's a lot. It's not as simple of a process on our end as it is on the TP's end. And just understanding that that's not going to be an instant 5 minutes later, you have all the information you need. So.
Right. So, I mean, on that note, like, what is the typical timeline? And obviously this varies by state and what the particular state's requirements are for what all needs to be done. Right. But are there any sort of like rough estimates on like, hey, here's the average time it takes to complete a screening?
Sure. I mean, the first thing we're reliant on the driver signing the form, right? So if the driver doesn't sign the form for a while, it's going to take longer. But once they've signed that form electronically, and by the way, you are required by the FCRA to have a form signed, whether it's a paper form that we can provide or whether it's an electronic form, that absolutely has to be done, and there's no getting around it. And I'm just saying that because sometimes people would rather not have had to go through that process, but it's actually very simple and it's electronically done. It's very easy. Once that driver does sign that form, it will take, I would say, between 1 and 3 business days, most often on the shorter end of that, depending on the state. But there are certain areas that don't have any automated processes that we still have to send a researcher to a courthouse. And those times it will take about 3 business days.
Okay.
So all typically right. Less though, if they're depending on the state, typically less than that.
Gotcha. And do people, often get sort of confused about the difference between, like fingerprinting and a criminal background check and, different types of whatever processes constitute an actual screening? Yes.
And fingerprinting is interesting because it's FBI and everyone knows about it. People think that's the best way to do a background check. Typically for employers, it's not. So unless it's in your contract that you have to fingerprint, we would never recommend it. A fingerprint will pull up any arrests and mostly pulls up arrest information, right? Because that's when you get fingerprinted. Arrest information can't be used for hiring because you never know if anyone actually did anything. So if they weren't convicted, you shouldn't be using that information. So the problem with the FBI fingerprinting is they don't necessarily go back and tell you, oh yeah, they were convicted or they weren't. So we use the court systems, which is where we get conviction information. And with the conviction information, we'll know the date they were convicted, what they were convicted for. And if it's been beyond the scope of when we're allowed to report it, which in a lot of cases is 7 years, then we just won't report it at all. So there's guidelines around what we're allowed to report and what we're not allowed to report. If it's been dismissed, if it's been expunged, you shouldn't be seeing it in those cases. So we won't report things that you're not supposed to see.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So FBI, you're going to kind of get everything, and it's not necessarily relevant to what you want. The FBI fingerprinting, court records you're only going to get the relevant information that you can see, that you're allowed to see. So again, unless you are required to fingerprint, if the state requires it, obviously you're going to do that. If they don't require it, it's probably not your best source, and it also takes forever. So right. That's not good.
Okay. So then here's a softball question, and I just want to ask this because I want to get this out there. You have like different regulating bodies like the FCRA, and you have the EEOC giving you guidelines. Oh, you have to do this and that. Like, why is it important to follow those exact guidelines? Like, if I'm an NEMT business, like I have so much going on, like I just got to get drivers. I got to do some sort of screening. There may be some regulating body saying, oh, you have to do this exact thing and that exact thing. What if I don't do those exact things and I just do some sort of general screening? Like, what happens to me? You know, what are the risks?
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you decide that disclosure forms and getting consent from your driver is taking too much time. You don't want to have to worry about that, and you'd rather just get verbal consent and move on. In that case, they could become part of a small claims suit, or they could become part of a, I'm blanking out the word right now. The claims where you get these large groups. So there could be, 20,000.
Class action suit.
Sorry. Yes.
You mean class action? Yeah.
Thank you. Class action suit. They could be one driver in a class action suit against, companies that are not getting consent. Well, now you're suddenly involved in a huge claim and a huge suit that you did not want to be involved in. So in other words, they can individually say, hey, I'm going to sue them because they didn't get consent, or they could become part of a large class action suit as well. They have rights as a consumer, it's called the consumer rights. And those are, certain rights that they can see the report, they can dispute it if they want to, then they come back to us and we'll take care of that and check if they're being truthful about their dispute or not. And they have to consent. And so if you ignore those things, then you're just opening yourself up to a lot of liability. With the EEOC, it's more of a guidance than a regulation, but there's guidance around the EEOC, like don't use arrest records for the reasons that I stated before. Arrest records might not have led to a conviction. And fortunately, some people get arrested in our country more than others, right? So we don't want to use arrest records. That's going to open you up to a discrimination suit, potentially. So it's all about following the rules so that in the long run, one, you're not hurting your drivers in any way, and two, you're not hurting your own company in any way in the future. So
yeah,
that would be my advice. Do it right, instead of having to go back later and find out the things you did wrong the hard way.
Absolutely. Pamela, you and your husband Peter have been doing this a long time. I'm sure that you've seen all sorts of interesting and crazy situations play out when it comes to driver screenings. So what I like to do sometimes in these interviews is story time. Can you just think back to some of the most interesting, experiences in dealing with either NEMT businesses or NEMT brokers?
Yeah, I just think screening in general, whether it's NEMT or outside of it, we get sort of some of the same stories. One of them would always be the drug screening story. It wasn't, there's no way I was positive. And then they either were in a car with someone who was smoking, they were in a house with someone who was smoking, they kissed someone who was smoking, they took Chinese herbal drugs. That was a fun one. There's just all sorts of reasons that people will adamantly claim they were not using any kind of drugs. However, unfortunately, there are drugs in their system. So it's always going to be, disproven, unfortunately, by science and the fact that they went through a drug test that was confirmed twice, and it's there. So we don't know how it got there, but it didn't get there by you kissing someone, unfortunately. So we do hear that a lot. Background screening, people don't deny things quite as often, and unless it was supposed to be removed from their record. And in that case, we'll help them. If it really was supposed to be removed from their record, we'll help them to get it removed at the courthouse. But most of the time it's there because we found it and they're just angry that we found it and they just preferred that we didn't find it. So, but we're here to keep everyone safe. We're here to keep the patients safe, the drivers safe, and protect the companies as well. So we're just doing our job. We're not against anyone. So.
Yep. What can you share, you've been doing this, in the NEMT space for 15 years. You cover a lot of different states. Can you just give us sort of some sort of, what kinds of NEMT businesses are you, working with more of, smaller fleets, bigger fleets, everything in between geographically, where all does Occuscreen work?
Honestly, we're all over the place. We have very large TPs. We have one person TPs. Most of our clients come from recommendation or referral by a broker. And so we work with several brokers, actually quite a few across the country, and they're all in different states. So wherever they are, we are. And then once people find us through maybe a broker, they're often going to use us for their other screening as well. So really, I really can't even say this is our niche for NEMT, because NEMT is kind of a niche on its own. And any broker or TP that needs help, as long as we can provide the screening that they need, we're ready to help. We don't do fingerprinting ourselves, but we do have some partners who help with that. But it's not typically required in NEMT. And if it is, like I said, we can help with partner. But that's the one thing that we don't offer. We can't be everywhere to fingerprint everyone, so we don't run around the country trying to do that.
Pamela, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would be worth sharing with our audience of NEMT businesses that are starting out and growing?
Interesting question. I think just it's finding someone who has some experience in what you're doing is very helpful, because there are thousands of screening companies. If you go online, you have no idea really who you're working with. If you just pull them off of a website, right? And so I think finding someone who has some experience in the field, who's accredited by the PBSA, it's just really important. And finding someone who gives you good service. We work very closely with our NEMT providers. We talk to them all day long. We answer our phone. We answer their emails. And I think the frustration for a lot of NEMT or any employer is if they can't reach anyone. They have all these questions and they don't know how to do things and they can't reach anyone. So find a partner that will actually work with you and answer your questions and be there for you. And then I think you'll find it's not that difficult. It's not that scary. It's not overwhelming. We'll try to make this like the easy part of your credentialing, because we know there's a whole lot of other stuff that you have to do. So yeah, that would be my guidelines, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you for helping NEMT businesses across the country be a bit more at ease. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I am going to put the info of Occuscreen in the description of this video.
Run, Bambi, run!
Awesome. Thanks, Pamela.